Es war ein König in Thule, gar treu bis an das Grab.
Hi, this is Patrick Giguere, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. So in this video, I'm going to talk about Great Resets. So not the Great Reset that the World Economic Forum is talking about, not the Great Reset or Great Resets that empires over the years have put countries and peoples through, not the Great Resets that the major world religions put countries and people through. So we're talking Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism to a lesser scale. We're not talking about those great resets. We're talking about a very different one that has its roots in higher dimensions. So, in the old days, people called higher dimensions the higher dimensional worlds, or even the lower dimensional world. They called them the spirit world. Irish mythology just called all these other realities, these dimensions that we don't see, just called it the other world. So that's where this Great Reset has its roots. And this Great Reset is actually going to be beneficial to humanity for a change. It's not going to be like the empires and the religions that tried to stomp spirituality into the mud and, entire peoples and ways of life into the mud. This is actually, I think, going to reverse a lot of that. So, the last 2,000 years were just ugly and really ran on lies. It was a dark age. So we're coming out of that. So, and this Great Reset, this sort of positive, you might call it positive, spiritual Great Reset, it's being catalyzed by the conjunction of Jupiter and Rahu. Took place on June 1st. They were in perfect conjunction on June 1st, 2023, a few days ago. And they were, sidereal position was 9 degrees Aries. So by the way, I read sidereal astrology. Sidereal astrology is visible sky astrology. When you look up in the sky, this is where the planets are. Mainstream astrology is disconnected from the visible sky. It's a different zodiac. So if my placement of planets within signs and degrees sound wrong, that's why. I'm trying to get too upset. If you get too upset, just stop watching the video. All right, so let's get into this. And thank you for all the viewers, likers, commenters, sharers. I appreciate you all. If you're not yet a subscriber, I ask you to consider doing so. Every time I upload a video, you'll get a notification. All right, so let's get into this. So, as you've seen in the title of this video, I'm calling this conjunction of Jupiter and Rahu Thor and Loki's Great Reset. So I'm going to get into that in a minute. I'm going to break that all down. But what this conjunction means to me, let's just get the nuts and bolts down here. So it took place in Aries. Aries is the sign of yourself, your identity. It's what goes on in your head. It's your initiative. It's the fire under your ass. Aries is a fire sign. It gets the whole cycle started. Aries is also leadership in the world. So it's all of the leadership figures in the world. Aries is the exaltation sign of the sun. It's where the sun is a celebrity. It's where the sun is intoxicated. Exaltation signs are where a planet is intoxicated. They just feel great. They get treated like celebrities. They're not home, but it's a good place. It's like if you went, on a great vacation to some place you just love. You're going to feel great. Let's say you had some all expenses paid vacation, and you're in 5-star accommodations and you've got a driver and you can do whatever the hell you want. You'd be very happy. You'd be very comfortable. You'd be feeling great. Eventually, you'd get tired of it and you'd want to go home, but it'd be a great time. So that's what planetary exaltations are all about. So the sun is exalted in Aries. The sun stands for executive figures, royals, leaders, presidents, people like that. So That's what they like to do. They like to kickstart things, and they like to be a leader. So that's the sign. Now the planets involved, you've got Jupiter. Jupiter is the priest of the zodiac, the spiritual teacher, the guru. In Sanskrit, they call Jupiter guru. It means deep, teacher of deep wisdom and knowledge. And Jupiter is all about expansion, optimism. It gives gifts. It's about taking on new things. Jupiter in Norse mythology is Thor. Thor or Thunor, the older name for Thor. Or Donner. Donner is the more German name, continental European name. So this Thor, Donner, Thunor is the thunder god. The thunder god is an archetype, stands for the electromagnetic force in the universe. So the electromagnetic force rules boundaries because it allows for things to be separate. It keeps my fingers from going through this notebook, keeps my ass from going through this chair and falling through the floor and falling through the earth. It allows for separateness. So we need separateness, we need boundaries in order to have a solid, definite, healthy sense of self and healthy boundaries. Really, our relationships go to shit when we don't have boundaries. All of our social relationships. When there are no boundaries, people get resentful of each other eventually, and it doesn't go well. So you need boundaries, you need separateness. This electromagnetic force is also the life force that animates every living thing, not just it's our bodies, our minds, plants, animals, even what we call inanimate objects. They have a certain amount of life force in them. This is why empty houses fall apart. It's like, when houses are inhabited, they have a purpose. They do have a life of their own. If a house sits empty for, a year, a couple of years, few years, it degrades a lot faster than if it was inhabited because it has no purpose. So everything has life force in it. Now, this archetype of Thor. Thor is a warrior, but foremost, he's a priest. And in the old days, in the pre-biblical times, pre-Christian times, the priest class advised the political rulers, but they were separate. And they had an obligation to give the rulers, the political rulers, some tough love when they were screwing around and they were derelict in their duties, when they weren't executing their duties properly. And they did this because the priest class, the priests and priestesses, were protectors of the people. So when the political leaders got way out of bounds and they couldn't even be spoken to, they wouldn't take advice, the priest class, the priestess class would basically lead popular rebellions against the political rulers. So Thor, this archetype of Thor, is a priest going to war. So Thor, he's a priest because he's a hallower, he's a sanctifier, and he's a protector of humanity and a protector of the earth. So Thor is the personification, the anthropomorphization of Jupiter. Jupiter is a literal protector of humanity because Jupiter is a protector of the earth. So Jupiter, scientifically, it's proven, sucks in comets and asteroids that could be a threat to the earth, because Jupiter is kind of a miniature sun. It's a gas giant. So it has such a gravitational pull and electromagnetic pull that it pulls in all of these dangerous objects in space and protects the earth. So it's very appropriate to attach this archetype of Thor to the planet Jupiter. So Jupiter is a giver of gifts, a spiritual teacher, just wants good things for humanity and for the earth. But when either one of them are threatened, it goes to war. So that's a general idea of Thor. Now let's look at, or Thor, aka Jupiter. Now let's look at Rahu. Rahu, other names, the Norse Germanic name is Loki. Another name is Lucifer. That's the Roman name. The Latin name, the Greek name is Phosphorus. Prometheus, a figure from Greek mythology, a demigod, is also Loki, Rahu, excuse me. So they're all trickster gods. Now, what tricksters do? Tricksters are catalysts, they're kickstarters. Now, especially these names Loki and Lucifer. They come from an Indo-European word, the Aryan language, which is, the root language, basically, of Eurasia. The word is Luka, so L-U-K-K-E. So Luka deals with a flash of lightning, a flash of brilliance, a flash of intellectual and intuitive and spiritual enlightenment. So it deals with a flash and it deals with a spark. The spark that a bolt of lightning will cause, which starts a fire and basically burns away dead wood. So what happens in all mythologies, these trickster gods, when the other gods, or when humanity, when any of them become arrogant, become complacent, they just become too comfortable in the status quo, these tricksters basically start a fire. So when people are arrogant, when they're complacent, they can easily be led into ego traps, and that's what these tricksters always do. They lead people, they lead the gods into ego traps so that transformation can happen. It basically gets everybody unstuck. That's why they do what they do. So in medieval times, Christian monks committed all of these mythologies to writing. So, the Norse myths in Scandinavia, and then the Irish myths in Ireland. The trickster in Irish myths is Lu, so L-U-G-H, Lu, and Lu is also a catalyst, a kickstarter. Very close to Lucifer. So what they do is, again, the gods get too arrogant, too complacent, too comfortable, or humanity gets that way. They shake up the status quo. They get transformation going. Now, what they also stand for, they stand for your present life karma. They stand for the experiences, because another word for desire is karma. So the desires that brought you into this incarnation. So essential to, the pagan worldview is reincarnation. And to me, reincarnation is why you'll meet a 25-year-old who is very mature, and then you'll meet an 85-year-old who's a complete child. It's all about how long they've been in Earth school. So I see the 3D as basically a school. Souls come here to work a syllabus. And then they graduate, and they become immortals, they become elves. They become teaching assistants who are guides to humanity, but who are outside of the reincarnation cycle. So these trickster gods is Rahu, Loki, Lu, Lucifer, Phosphorus, Prometheus. They're masters of desires, masters of karmas. Wherever this Rahu falls in your chart, it stands for the karmas, the desires for experiences that brought you into this life. So, and what those desires serve as catalysts and kickstarters in your life. Especially when you're younger, you're in your 20s, teenager in your 20s, those desires are going to lead you into your own ego traps. You're going to have upsets and pitfalls because you're basically trying to, calibrate your own life. You're trying to break your own life in. So, and what these trickster gods do is they open portals in our lives. They open portals that help us to manifest what we want out of life. So you put that Rahu with Jupiter. Rahu opens these portals, this master of desire, this master of magic, master of secrets. You mix that influence with Jupiter. Jupiter expands whatever he comes near. And actually, Rahu is an expander as well. So you get a big ass portal. Now, another thing about Rahu and Jupiter's relationship, Jupiter is said to be the only planet that can control Rahu. So in the mythology, these trickster gods, while executing their duties, they end up pissing off all the other gods because these tricksters, as Rahu, Loki, Lucifer, Lu, Prometheus, they want to tell all the secrets. They want to tell everybody all the secrets. They're sort of great revealers, and this angers the other gods. So there's even a story in Norse mythology called the Flyting of Loki. A flitting was basically when people would roast each other at banquets. So at a banquet of the gods, Loki roasts all the gods in there, and he's basically telling the truth about things they've done that they don't want people to know. And they chase him out because they get angry. So yeah, that Rahu, Loki, that being, that part of ourselves, because these planets exist inside of us and we project them into the heavens, this part of ourselves wants to tell all the secrets. And in the myths, it's only, especially in the Norse mythology, it's only Thor who can get Loki to chill out, to shut up, to stop roasting people. And even in that story, the Flyting of Loki, Loki's going on, and he's basically telling all the secrets about all these things that the gods have done. And finally, Thor just turns to him and he says, "Stop." And Loki shuts up. And it's because only the life force can get this trickster force under control. So that's why things like meditation, qigong, all that stuff are so important, because you can't have full awareness, and you can't basically master your own consciousness. You can't be fully conscious without having enough life force. If you're deficient in energy, you're going to run on unconscious autopilot. So they have a very important relationship. So, Thor stands for all things good, and Loki's the trickster. Loki, Lucifer, whatever you call this force in the universe, it's not the devil and it's not Satan. Because this God, this force in the universe, was portrayed as Satan or a devil by the Christian ministers and preachers and priests, because enlightenment, desires, and individuality are the last things that any church wants you to have, because you're not going to give money to that church and you're not going to support that church pastor. And in the old days, becoming a pastor, a priest, a minister, it was a great way to get out of doing farm work. If you're somebody who liked philosophy, who liked to read, who was above average intelligence, a lot of those people didn't want to break their backs farming, doing manual labor. So they joined a church. They went to work for a church. And it's like anything else. By the time people are ready to retire, it's right when they start understanding the system they work in. And then too, just to have a job, they have to play ball, these churchmen. So, right, wrong, or otherwise. So yeah, no church, no religious institution anywhere wants you to have individuality, enlightenment, and to know what your genuine desires are. So that's why Lucifer, Loki, whatever you want to call him, was portrayed as a devil and a Satan. It's simply not true. So yeah, Jupiter, Rahu together, it's a portal. It's a portal to other dimensions that'll help us to bring things into our life that we can manifest. Now, the thing about this, people what you hear a lot of the time when you talk to people about higher dimensional beings, beings of light, eventually people will say, oh, well, what if a being of light wants to possess me and ruin me and take my soul? And it's like, well, higher dimensional beings don't do that. Lower dimensional, yes. Now, as far as this portal goes, you're the one who's going to determine what comes out of it. And it's all about what you expect from life, what you intend, and what actions you take. Because the actions you take are determined by what you expect from life. So your personal self-fulfilling prophecy. So based on that, this portal is going to, whatever comes out of it is basically what you expect and what you work towards. So you basically have to decide what it is that you want. So do you want to keep entertaining your paranoid fantasies and, keep trying to manifest the rapture and the end of the world and Armageddon and all this shit and Satan doing a dance on the earth? Now, those scenarios, this whole Armageddon apocalypse thing from the book of Revelations, living through that can be a lot easier than actually getting a life and figuring out what it is that you want from life, what it is that you want to do, and understanding who the hell it is you really are. It's a lot easier to just do exactly what your parents do, to copy their lives, to do what they told you, do what your teachers tell you, do what your friends expect of you, do what your boss tells you, do what your coworkers expect of you, do what your whole family expects of you, and be exactly who they want you to be. That's a lot easier than living your own life and being your own ruler and your own leader. And so by virtue of that, it's a lot easier to have Armageddon and the apocalypse and have Jesus come with the fucking goofy ass sword sticking out of his mouth and and have the La Palma tsunami wipe out the whole Atlantic coast on every continent. It's much easier to do that than it is to get a life. So based on what you expect from life, what your self-fulfilling prophecy is, this portal that fully opened on the 1st of June this year, 2023, that's going to determine what your future looks like. So, no pressure, but you're here to live life. You're not here to follow a rule book and be all subservient and, just to be a humble bragger. So a friend of mine taught me that one, humble bragger. So the way I see the major world religions, they teach people how to humble brag. So people are like, oh, Lord, I'm an unworthy, impure sinner. Oh, save me, save me. Well, that is a different way of being narcissistic and arrogant. Because people get in these competitions. It's like, oh, I'm an unworthy, humble sinner. And then the person next to him or the church across the street's like, no, we're the most humble, unworthy sinners. And everybody's in a pissing contest about who's the bigger, unworthy, filthy, awful sinner. Humble, awful, unworthy, filthy sinner that needs to be saved. So it's humble bragging. So we're not here to do that. We're here to know what it is that makes us happy and to go out and to get it and to pursue it. Or we can be martyrs and we can be humble braggers and we can get caught up in this idea that we need to be saved and I'm just so humble because I'm so unworthy and I'm nothing compared to the Lord. It's another way of humble bragging. We're not here to do that. Selflessness is a dirty thing. Religious fundamentalists, Nazis, communists, scientific atheists like Bill Gates, billionaire eco-terrorists, they're all very selfless people. They don't know who they are. So since they don't have a self, they have no boundaries, they get up in other people's business. And They make other people's lives living hell, and they try to make other people just like them. They're always out to convert people. They are all evangelists of one kind. And evangelists have no boundaries. They have no sense of self. And they just can't rest until everybody thinks, feels, and behaves and speaks just like them. So selflessness is a dirty thing. Selflessness has always gotten people killed. So in witch trials, crusades, purges, revolutions, it's an ugly thing. Selflessness is very ugly. When you have a sense of self, when you're a little bit selfish. Now, selfishness has to be balanced. You also have to consider other people. You have to balance the scale. But to have a fulfilling, constructive, healthy life, you need to be a little selfish. So we need this. We need some selfishness to actually put the world back in balance. And you can't help anyone. You can't do anything for anybody unless you're a little selfish. So this is very important. And Rahu is all about that. Like, what do you want? How do you want to be selfish so that you can pursue your goals and dreams and live a fulfilling life? And then Jupiter expands all that. So, what we want here is we want Jupiter to rule this conjunction. Now, since ahead of this conjunction, since Jupiter was moving forward from our point of view on Earth, was progressing from our point of view on Earth, and Rahu, just like Ketu being a node of the moon, is always in retrogression, is always in retrograde. So leading up to this conjunction, Jupiter had the lower degree, and in planetary conjunctions, the one at the lower degree always rules the conjunction. So this is important to understanding your own chart, is knowing if you have conjunctions, knowing which one's at the lower degree. So if this is something you want to find out, I'm happy to do a reading with you. So you know how to find me. I've got a booking calendar on my website. So there you go. So what does this mean? What does this conjunction mean for the whole world? So again, it's Aries, it's leadership, it's identity, it's yourself, it's what goes on in your head, it's initiative, it's action. So for all of us, we get this portal where we can get a new sense of identity, a new sense of self. We can think differently. Now, Uranus and Mercury have been in Aries for some time, and they were in there when Jupiter and Rahu fully conjuncted. So they both deal with thinking. So it's an idea to think differently and to have new institutions of leadership in this world. So this is a huge conjunction. So sun sign of Aries, and then the lunar mansion they took place in, 9 degrees Aries sidereal. The Vedic name is Ashwini, and the European name is Dioscuri. So the Dioscuri, or the Ashwinis, they're twin brothers. One of them, they had the same mother. One of them was son of Zeus. He was immortal, son of Jupiter. And the other one was the son of a mortal man. So the one who was the son of Zeus, he lived among the Olympians, among the gods of Olympus. When the mortal brother died, he was raised to the celestial realms and basically took a place among the gods of Olympus. And so these two brothers, who in all mythologies are horsemen, they are protectors and helpers of humanity. So when people are in trouble, they call upon them. So another thing about this conjunction is that it's all about an opportunity for us to call in a lifeline, to get some help, to get some divine help. So very important and very powerful. So pretty cool. Now, as an American, I like to look at it from an American perspective. So when you superimpose this conjunction over the chart, the natal chart for the United States of America, Aries is the fifth house. So the fifth house deals with speculation, so basically financial gambling like the stock market, the bond market, cryptos. It deals with the performance art of politics, because politics is a big theater show. It's not really real. Those people are not who they look like, and they don't have the power that they tell you they have and that they tell you they have in school. So it's about a portal that can bring in new beginnings for all of those things. Fifth house is also fulfillment, fun, ancient knowledge, publication, creative works. So it's a portal for all those things. So very powerful conjunction. I can't state this enough. Now, an interesting thing about these Jupiter-Rahu conjunctions in sidereal Aries, when we look back in time at the astrology, there hasn't been a Jupiter-Rahu conjunction in sidereal Aries since 1929. It was May 6th, 1929. So the way I see that one is that portal was what we could sort of call forces of unconsciousness, forces of darkness, people will call forces of evil. Those forces were able to exploit the last conjunction of Jupiter in Rahu and Aries. And so that was May 6, 1929. 5 months later, October the 24th and 29th, 1929, you had Black Thursday and Black Tuesday. Those were the big financial crashes back then that brought about the Great Depression. And so the Great Depression, that was an engineered event. It was engineered by Wall Street. They wanted to have a great reset. They wanted more power. They wanted to fully get the government in their pocket. 16 years before that, 1913, they had a corrupt president, Woodrow Wilson, and a handful of corrupt Congress members signed the National Security Act, the Federal Reserve Act during Christmas time. I think it was December 23rd, 1929. So they pulled that off, and they made the United States of America a slave to its banking system. So, yeah, those forces of darkness, forces of unconsciousness, they use that portal to conduct their own great reset. So they engineered that collapse, and years ahead of time they planned it, and they encouraged all kinds of irresponsible investing and speculating. So they caused the crash, which caused the depression. They already had the New Deal planned out. The New Deal wasn't a program where the government taxed the rich and used the money to invest in infrastructure and social programs. It was a private investment program. So Wall Street went to the government and said, hey, we'll invest in the public sphere. You just have to guarantee it. You have to guarantee we're going to get our money back with interest. So then basically World War II had to happen, and then the United States had to go into World War II so that the New Deal investment money could get paid back to Wall Street. And then World War II was really about the corporate one world order. So the United Nations, it's not a body that protects you from bullies, and protects the underprivileged from bullies. The United Nations is a world government that facilitates trade and commerce. The UN works for the big multinational banks and corporations. So they got their new world order. And 1929 laid the groundwork for it. And then, that order basically prevailed after World War II for 75 years. I call it the World War II party because, the baby boom, the generation immediately older than them, even the World War II generation to some degree, they thought the Western world had this unbelievable prosperity because they won World War II. Well, the Western world didn't do much in World War II. It was the Soviets that fought 90% of World War II. The reason that the West had unbelievable luxury and prosperity after World War II was because this world order was implemented and the US military was the muscle for it. So that all started coming down in 2020. And immediately, World Economic Forum starts talking about a great reset. Well, they're not going to pull it off. There will be a great reset, but it's one that follows spiritual law, natural law. This great reset, again, has its roots in higher dimensions, what we call the spirit world or the other world. So, very different type of Jupiter-Rahu conjunction than it was in 1929. And, what forces do we have to thank for our protection? Now, I think we are being protected through this. So this Jupiter-Rahu conjunction on June 1st, 2023, it lays the cornerstone and the foundation for the next 10 years. And in 10 years, you're not going to recognize the world, trust me. There's going to be major institutional collapses between then and now. It's going to be a very different world. It's going to be a better world. And in 20 years, it's going to be very different. The world's going in a better direction. And like I said, the lunar mansion that these two planets met in, Dioscuri, the Ashwinis, the horsemen, these immortal twins that help humanity, we have them to thank. Now, another force we have to thank is Saturn. So the planet Saturn. Saturn's not a tormentor. Saturn's not Satan. Saturn's not evil. Saturn is a limiter. Saturn puts limitations on us so that we don't go off the rails, keeps us honest, keeps us real. So Saturn, during this conjunction, was 60 degrees away. It was 3 houses away. In Aquarius, one of its home signs. Saturn is a public servant. Saturn is an advocate for the underdogs, for we the people. And Aquarius is one of Saturn's home signs. This is where Saturn gives gifts. Saturn gives tough love in Capricorn. It's other home sign, but in Aquarius, it gives gifts. So Saturn, with this sextile, this 60-degree aspect, was looking at this Jupiter-Rahu conjunction. Now, the thing about Jupiter and Rahu, Rahu is a Kickstarter. Rahu doesn't stick around and run things. Jupiter would like to stick around and run things, but Jupiter just is always taking new things on. Jupiter overcommits. Jupiter's like the person that promises everybody that they're going to do something for them, and they make too many promises and they can't get any of it done. So Jupiter and Rahu conjunctions, when they meet up, new things happen, but they usually don't last because neither Jupiter nor Rahu has the wherewithal to see it through. So when they met in 1929, they got this half-assed Ponzi scheme started. And it's been falling apart. It wasn't meant to last. But this time, Saturn was looking at the conjunction from Aquarius. So basically, Saturn's attitude is like, okay, you guys can open a portal. You guys can start some new projects, do some new things, but it's not going to be a half-assed Ponzi scheme. It's not going to be an oppressive, half-assed half-assed financial Ponzi scheme, just like the Great Depression and the New Deal and World War II and the United Nations and a Cold War. This is going to have to be real. It's like, we're not going to do globalism again. So, yeah, really, globalism as we know it really got rolling in 1929 after this Jupiter-Rahu conjunction. So, yeah, not happening. So we're not going to repeat. Now, a repeat of history, it's a definite concern, because when you look at the progress of Uranus has an 84-year orbit. So September 1st, 2023, Uranus will be where it was on September 1st, 1939. That's when World War II started. That's when the Third Reich invaded Poland. So that's not going to happen again. Really, these globalists are falling apart. And they're not going to go quietly, though. But Saturn has our back. So that's a very good thing here. So yeah, and like I said, during that conjunction, you also had Mercury and Uranus. So Mercury is the intellect. Uranus is the higher octave, the higher vibration of Mercury. So Uranus is the ruler of the eighth sphere. Saturn, the outermost visible planet, that's the seventh sphere. So when I talk about these spheres, when you look at artwork from medieval times, from the Renaissance, they depict these spheres of the planets. So they're concentric spheres. They're like Russian dolls. The Earth is in the dead center, and then they radiate outwards. Saturn, the most distant visible planet, the most outer sphere of the visible planets, rules the 3D. Saturn is the master of the 3D, the master of magic. And one of the things Saturn does, Saturn rules conformity, but Saturn will also release you from conformity. When you become conscious enough, Saturn will allow you to leave conformity behind you. Saturn will be like, well, you know what? Your church and your parents and your family and your boss, they really didn't know everything. But I needed you to think that, and I needed you to just do what they told you until you became conscious enough to be your own leader. So once you pass that lesson, Saturn's like, I got nothing for you. You got to go see my father, Uranus. Uranus is a keeper of the eighth sphere, and he is the keeper of the gates of paradise. So then you move on to Uranus, and Uranus deals with awakenings and rebellions. So it's where you realize that, your church, your holy book, your parents, your teachers, your boss, they didn't know what was best for you because they don't really know the real you. So Uranus is where you start discovering the real you. So again, higher order of Mercury. So Uranus is like a spiritual, higher dimensional intellect. So both of them, the regular intellect Mercury and then the spiritual intellect Uranus, were both in Aries while Rahu and Jupiter were fully conjuncting. So this means it's an opportunity to see ourselves in the world in a whole new light. Not just intellectually, but really spiritually. You could even look at Uranus as being related to the crown chakra. And the crown chakra is infinity, in the universe. So we basically get a portal where we can channel the infinite and recreate our identity and recreate ourselves. So this is a huge conjunction. So, and again, we've got Saturn watching our backs. So we don't have to live the Great Depression and World War II all over again. There'll be some economic drama for sure. Institutions will collapse. People will have freakouts. But we're not going to relive history. This Ukraine war, I don't see this turning into a World War III. I think NATO and the United States are going to be humiliated. So yeah, I've got a lot of positive feeling about this. Now, the thing is, like I said, 1929, last time we had Rahu and Jupiter conjunct sidereal Aries, the lunar mansion they conjunct in was it was Hades. So Hades is the god of the underworld. So it's all about facing really unpleasant truths you'd rather not deal with. So I think the Great Depression, World War II, and then the Cold War, humanity for 90 years basically got to look in the mirror. We got to see what sheeple that we had become, what sheeple that religion had turned us into. So, I don't begrudge anybody their spirituality and their religion, but if we're going to have a conversation, I like people to know the difference between religion and spirituality. Spirituality has actually been hated by religion, especially for the past 2,000 years. Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, those institutions have conducted ethnic cleansing to suppress spirituality in favor of dogmatic religion and just, the rule book. People will tell you like, well, without the Bible and 10 Commandments, there'd be no morality. And it's like, if you need 10 Commandments to be a good person, it's like you've got bigger problems. You don't need that to be a good person. But that is basically an advertising campaign that religion has used to make itself relevant. They'd be like, well, if you didn't have us and if you didn't listen to us, everybody would be horrible and they'd be satanic. And it's like, no. India is like the oldest pagan polytheistic society on earth. There's plenty of goodness in India. The American Indians, the Native Americans, pagan polytheistic society. There's plenty of goodness within those people. The Taoists, in East Asia, plenty of goodness there. What they don't have is they don't have this belief that being nice makes you a good person. Being a good person and being nice are two different things. So they're not all syrupy sweet and they're like, oh, I'm in love with the Lord, when people get kind of spacey and they don't have that. And that's the difference between like Asian Buddhists and Western Buddhists. It's like the Western Buddhists, they try to act syrupy nice, but they're often not very nice people. Their nasty side comes out. So again, I'm not saying people are stupid or bad people, if they're part of a major world religion, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. I'm just saying, though, those institutions have been misleading people. So it's just something to think about, and a big problem we have here in America, people are completely disconnected from history. And they just think that, the world came into being in like 1776 or 1861 or whenever their, newfangled like evangelical church was founded. It's not that simple. The world is old. And the world predates whenever you think it began. So, Americans are, and America is a Protestant culture. So what you will often find in the American Protestant culture, it's the same in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. In this American Protestant culture, people think that they're like, oh, well, that Catholic Church is so filthy, but we have such a better thing going on. And it's like, well, the Catholic Church is your church's mother. And, apples really usually don't fall far from the tree. Sometimes they roll down the hill and away, but usually they don't fall far from that tree. So All the other churches, they're apples that didn't fall far from the tree. So you don't escape history just because you're part of some, you know, your ancestors crossed the ocean to America and you have democracy and, you're part of some special Protestant church with the only true revelation that there is out there. It's not that simple. To understand the world, you have to learn history. You have to read. And Americans don't like to read. They like the TV news. They like Netflix. They like social media. But Amazon Prime. But to really understand the world, you have to learn history. You have to learn the history of the tribes that you come from biologically. That's going to tell you a lot about your deep unconscious beliefs. So, yeah. So anyway, yeah, so getting back to this conjunction in 1929, Saturn wasn't there. Saturn wasn't in a position to be watching it and to help us. Saturn was actually all the way off in Sagittarius, and it didn't have an aspect that was looking at these planets while they were conjuncting. And then in Aries in May of 1929, on May 6th, Rahu and Jupiter met at 28, sidereal Aries. Sun was at 22, so Sun was ruling the conjunction. Sun is the soul, but it's also the ego, and it's the executive figures and the rulers in our world. So it was really the human rulers in our world, the politicians, the bankers, the corporate executives. They're the ones that took advantage of that portal that Rahu and Jupiter opened. And because, Rahu and Jupiter don't have the staying power to see new projects through, those characters took the whole thing over and they started this half-assed Ponzi scheme. They tried to implement their one world order. That really started collapsing in 2020. So they were like, how are we going to keep people in this mental prison we created? And they're like, oh, well, let's scare them. Let's get them the needlecraft. Let's get them multiple doses of the needlecraft. Let's lock them down. And, let's do more of the same. So not going to happen this time. Saturn won't allow it. Again, Saturn is the keeper of natural law and spiritual law. So, yeah, I personally am not worrying about a reoccurrence of the Great Depression and World War II. There'll be economic hiccups. There'll be some crashes. There'll be dramas. There'll be some institutions collapsing. I think countries will even break up. But we're not going to relive the whole 1929 through 2020 with Great Depressions, World Wars, and Cold Wars, and, one world orders. So I think that's about it. Thanks for tuning in. Have a nice one.
Es war ein König